The first ever professional hockey game ended in a fight, and it has been part of the game ever since. According to Mike Chambers of the Denver Post in 2016, fighting was very commonplace in the early days of the NHL and officially became a 5-minute major in 1922. In the late 60s, the league doubled in size, and the new teams lacked the talent to compete with the original six. So to close the gap, they used fighting and extremely physical play to win. The best of those teams was the Philadelphia Flyers, who were called the Broad Street Bullies for their toughness. They won multiple Stanley Cups during this era. Since then, the NHL has added helmet rules, third man rule, instigator rule, and bench rule to help keep fights safer. Hockey is one of my favorite sports, and every year there is always a discussion on whether or not fighting should be a part of the game. The rising awareness of concussions in sports has only made this argument gain more traction. Others just see it as unnecessary and something that interrupts the flow of the game. Fighting gets an unfair blame because it's an easy target. In this speech, I'm going to tell you what is wrong with this viewpoint and make some points on why it needs to stay. The main cause for this argument is to try to eliminate the risk of concussions. This is a big issue in other sports such as football, soccer, and even professional wrestling. There are two reasons why concussion numbers have gone up in the NHL. The first is more awareness about concussions, and the second is better diagnosing methods and protocols being put in place by the league. There is also another issue with the safety equipment that the players are wearing. According to Jason Israelski of the Journal of the Canadian Chiropractic Association in 2014, concussions accounted for only 2 to 14% of all injuries and 15 to 30% of head injuries, so it isn't as prevalent of an issue as people want to make it. The second thing leading to an increase in concussions is better pads, which sounds very weird, but Travis Peterson of Man-Made in 2010 explains how the new plastic and composite pads have made players feel safer, but the helmet has fell behind the others. As a result of this, players are able to go about 30 miles per hour and finish checks. According to the Ice Guardians documentary in 2016, the most dangerous play in hockey is the hard padded shoulder to the head. It also features old players saying that because of the pads they wore at the time and how weak they were, that they had to be very careful when checking. That's not the case today. When people hear about fighting in hockey, they think it's something that happens all the time. But in reality, it isn't as common as it once was. According to Jonas Siegel of the CBC in 2016, fights were down 50% from where they were just 5 years prior. A big reason for that drop is that the enforcer role is disappearing. According to Steve Lepore of Rolling Stone in 2014, enforcers are being replaced by pests, or players who try to get opposing players to commit penalties out of frustration. This shift has occurred because there is little talent separation between the teams in the league today. So they need all four lines to be able to contribute, eliminating the spot for the enforcer. The 2016 documentary Ice Guardians also has interviews with players mentioning going overseas and playing in leagues without fighting, that players were dirtier and there were more cheap shots than over here in the North American leagues where they allow fighting. Another reason for fighting to stay in the game is that the players and fans both want it to stay. In the CBC Sports article in 2011, the NHL Players Association released the results of a poll that showed almost 98% of players wanted it to stay. And as a fan of the game, I can say that it is something we want to stay as well. It helps influence the momentum of a game and can help bring a team back in it. If fighting is taken out of the game, players will lose self-policing of what referees miss. Yes, there are suspensions for dirty hits, but a lot of people would take a 1 or 2 week suspension and a fine in return for a division rival being without their star player for an extended period of time. With fighting in the game, the dirty player must also worry about getting hurt themselves. It's a big deterrent. Players have to think twice before they take a cheap shot at a defenseless player. The good thing about this is that fighting is already allowed by the rules. So what people need to do is get information out that fighting isn't as bad for hockey as people make it seem. The main point of this speech was to show that fighting is down and not the leading cause of concussions in the league that people try to make it out to be. It's important for the players to be able to self-police so there is less dirty hits and cheap shots. Fighting isn't a way to hurt another player. It's used to keep other players safe. Lastly, it's always been a part of the game, so why should that change now?